So welcome everybody. We're really excited to be here. We're very excited to see each other, even if it's not live. We've come from around the world, quite literally, all of us here, and we'll meet everybody as we go bit by bit through the session. And today we thought we'd just talk about our natal moon. So we're just going to talk about what the moon feels like, what it feels like to live through this moon, and what we might have had as an experience in life because of how our moon operates. And then we'll just see how the questions arise from that. So it's a bit of an experiment. We're all here to discover something. And basically, we're just a bunch of astrology nuts who are just enjoying talking about astrology with people who know a little bit as well. So it's a good way to learn from each other. That's the way I see it. And so also for those of you who are not hearing your moon, because of course there's not enough of us, and then we've got 3 Cancer moons, I'm afraid. We've got a triple header here, and so we haven't got all the moons covered. So maybe for those of you in the comment section, you could add your experience of your moon if you've got some stories, and then in the future we can always dip back into moons with new people as well. So Ronit, you have the Aries moon. So would you be kind enough to introduce yourself and start and just explain a little bit? I just wanted to, maybe as a guideline, I wrote 4 words down regarding the moon. It just kind of came to me like that because I thought it could be helpful just to at least tick those boxes. And it's mother, mood, mind, and maison, because maison is M. So our home. Where do we live? So if you keep those things in mind as you're telling your story, just to make sure we kind of get a sense of all of those aspects of your moon, okay? So take it over, Ronit.
So my name is Ronit. I have a moon in Aries, 26 degrees in Aries, and it's in the 6th house. It's Quesma Venus. And I have a sun in, which I think is quite important also to add. My sun is in Sagittarius, and my ascendant is in Scorpio. So Mars rules my my chart in a big way. And as much as I think that I was a Jupiterian person throughout my youth or my childhood, as I get older, I have become a lot more Martian in a way. You know, having a moon in Aries, I think is a little bit of a conflict, because the moon is about emotions, and, you know, Mars emotions are quite like forward. I think Mars character is more of a forward, outspoken. But I feel that I have a contradiction because I have a Scorpio ascendant, that I tend to keep it in. So there's that conversation of what do I say and how do I say it? But on the other hand, when people look at me, they can say how I feel. So they can tell from my face how I feel. And that's the moon, the emotional side that the moon shows. Yeah, as far as home concerns, I lived away from home for 33 years. So, but yet home is very important to me. And on the other hand, family, I'm a very like easygoing parent. So I think adventurous, like if I look at Aries, who is like just like going forward and like taking charge of the family. That would be the way I see the Aries moon as a parent. Yeah, I think that's in a nutshell what I can say. That maybe more things will come.
Fantastic. Can I just have a question in terms of that Mars energy, that feistiness and that spontaneity? Do you see that in your life? Do you see that in terms of maybe how you might respond to things or how people
Oh
respond
yes,
to
I will say things without thinking.
you?
So I do have that in me, that but I think that's also the Sagittarian side that speaks out, you know. So it's a combination of things, but I am very forward. I'm very straightforward. I speak my mind. My emotions are quite, I'm not a, like, I would see an Aries moon more of a drama queen or a drama person. I don't think, I don't see myself as a drama person. I rather retreat than go all out with emotions. Like, I don't explode. You know, I have friends.
Maybe that's from this little guy though. Would you think that's maybe why, rather than wanting to be a drama queen, you kind of hold yourself back? Because it may not be about the desire. The desire might be there, but you don't do it. Could that be right?
Yes, then I would just pull back and not show or not speak at all, and let things just ride the wave. Almost like, also I don't find the need for confrontation. And I think Aries people are more confrontational. I have many Aries in my life. I was married to an Aries for nearly 30 years. So it's a very, very different, strong, characteristic personality. And to see it in the moon, it's like almost like opposite. You know, it's almost like the two opposites, where I see the moon like very Cancerian, very loving, very caring, very, and I am very loving and very caring, and I'm very emotional, but that I think I draw that from Scorpio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also with that moon, it might be more like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've come across some people who've, it's more from childhood that moon is that way. So it's not your nature. It's more like the way that you lived, where your mom was super dynamic and really supercharged and really busy and potentially very independent and so on. And so you kind of learned to react that way to people who were a bit more feisty around you, but it's not necessarily that you're the feisty one. Does that make sense in your case?
No, in my case, I was the feisty one.
Okay.
As a child, I was a rebel, a total rebel. I was a tomboy. I was a nonconformist. My mother was like, she was a housewife, you know, she raised children. That was her, she raised 6 children. That was her job, her life, everything was her family. And I was the opposite. I wanted to do things my way. I needed to do everything the opposite of what the rest of the clan does. So maybe that's my moon, you know, maybe that is my moon.
Yeah, very independent, huh? Very
Yes,
independent minded.
yes, very independent, totally. And also being alone it's a very strange thing, because I think being solo is I think it's very much an Aries trait of happy to be solo. But I fluctuate with it. And I think maybe the moon phases would reveal of how sometimes I do need to retract and be on my own, but then I do need the company and the people and the social life. So I go through phases. So I have to notice it when it's like a full moon or a new moon. But I'm a moonholic. I have a fascination with full moons. I follow wherever I go in the world. I always take photos of full moons. I am obsessed with full moon. I'm obsessed with the way I feel in the full moon. It's an extreme, I cannot explain it, but there's like an explosion of emotions on every full moon. So, and here we go as well. Like, I have been attracted to this session about the moon.
Yeah, yeah. And explosion of emotions is probably a fantastic byline for Aries moon.
When I do explode.
In a nutshell, that's pretty good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Does anybody here have any questions then for Ronit, or is there anything that you want to add? So if we're done there, we'll just move along. And Camille, would you mind starting then for the Cancer crowd?
Yes, hello.
Get your chart while you're doing
Yeah,
that.
you can put my chart up. I'm Camille or Camille. I live in Berlin for the last 15 years, but I'm American from California. And yeah, very happy to be here. So here's my chart. Yes, the moon in my life. So I've always, definitely mother would be the very first symbol for me, the archetype that comes up for the moon, 100%. And in my own life, that would be the mother being one of the most important roles or things in my life from the very get-go. So you can see that my moon is also conjunct the Par de Fortune and North Node, and also at 14 degrees is the fixed star Sirius is also there. It's also in a night chart, so the moon being the more prominent luminary, and then also just the highest part of my chart, closest to the MC, just like the most action going on at the top of the chart. So I really see that come alive in my own life. I was adopted right after I was born. My birth mother disappeared and I was adopted by her oldest sister. And so I always knew about my real mother. So it was just this the biggest theme in my life was not knowing my birth mother, but her being around through stories and pictures from my family. And I was adopted by a mother who's extremely caring. She was a nurse for 40 years. So like caregiver is completely what she embodies, and sacrifice and just nurturer, absolutely. I also had 2 older sisters, and my oldest sister was 7 years older, and she, because my mother worked a lot, she really helped to raise me. She thought I was her daughter. And so I kind of grew up with this like 3 mothers. So this like triple goddess or triple moon goddess theme I saw play out from the very beginning. So my real mother was in the spirit world. And then I had these 2 other mothers kind of raising me. And 8 years ago, my sister died. So I went through kind of a loss of two of the mothers, but they're both with me, definitely in spirit world. So anyway, but mother is this absolute theme of my life. I never thought I would be a mother. I was raised in a very patriarchal family. So always listening to our father and following him. And he was always saying that, you know, the world is overpopulated and definitely don't have kids. You can always adopt kids. So as a very small child, I grew up thinking I'm not going to have kids. I'm going to travel and do other things. And it wasn't on my radar at all. But I did end up having my first child when I was 25 in Berlin. So I got married, had a baby, left my family of California. And then, so quite literally the moon in the 9th house of having children in far off places was just kind of, you know, just my destiny. I didn't plan it at all. And that's what ended up happening. I ended up having 2 other kids later with another man. And now I'm a single mom. So now I'm a single mom with 3 kids. And so mother is my absolute life. I have 2 small ones, a 5 and a 3-year-old. And the last 6 years, it's just mother. And that's all I have time for, which is beautiful. It came to me very naturally, the role as mother, even though it wasn't something that I had my eyes set on. And so I kind of felt like I just ended up here and definitely embracing it. When I became a mother, I was able to have time to learn astrology. So it was being at home and not having a big community, but I had then books, and then I really got into astrology in that time. So it's been about 6 years. It was my oldest sister who introduced me to astrology. In the 90s, she studied and she had my chart done when I was quite small. So I also grew up kind of with the chart and having a very beginner's idea of the symbolism and everything, but that was always a part of my life. And yeah, so the Cancer moon, just moon in the moon at home. I feel home is my sanctuary for sure. Now, yeah, just making it, yeah, it's just literal because I have 3 small kids. I'm gonna be home and feeding them and doing the natural.
You're nurturing now after you've been nurtured so much, yeah.
And I think it's interesting because as a child or a teen or in my 20s, I would have really thought a lot of us do just think my life was going on a completely different path. And here I am, my children are half German, half Turkish. They speak German and English, and we're away from my family. I was very, very close to my family, Mexican family, really big part of my childhood. And now here, my kids don't have aunties or uncles or cousins. We do visit every couple of years at home, but they have a very different role. They don't also, single mom, they don't, my son has a really close connection with his father. I co-parent my 14-year-old son with his dad. But yeah, anyway, so it's an interesting kind of coming in with being a mother and a nurturer in completely different aspects of life than what I was raised with, but it's going really well. And I don't know about what else. As far as the crab symbol, I definitely am one with emotions to first need to come into my shell. I don't know what to say. I'm getting better as I'm getting older, but as younger, like what's really can't even talk almost. If there's confrontation, for example, definitely want to go in and just kind of be still. And before I'm able to communicate what are my needs or what are, what am I even feeling? And also, putting the needs of others first, kind of seeing that from my mom, learning that. And I feel like I'm just kind of getting out of that, really ready to put, to understand and feel what my needs are and to look at those before having to make others happy.
Amazing.
Okay.
What a story. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah, hey, my name is Samah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Camille. I was wondering about the square actually, and how you might have, because they're pretty intense activity also there in the
this
12th house.
Mars and Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has, just in the last, I guess when I started learning about astrology, really, for the first part of my life, I was always focused on this trine with the Scorpio ascendant and then my sun all in the middle of the chart, so the 14 degrees, 15. And I was really like water, emotion, really dreamy, creative. And then when my life kind of took a turn or things got harder, it was this point, this like 20 degrees in my 12th house at Libra that really came up and was a lot of the things that I've been working on the last 6 years with authority, with like authority to men and where's my role in that, and being able to voice my opinions, to not just give away my power and get over that so that I can be in relationship. Right now, I've been single for 6 years, and it's been a very, very healthy for me to understand, again, like I said, what am I feeling? What are my wants, rather than just straight up giving my power away, doing what I'm told, and really, so I felt, as far as 12th house, I would say also struggling with addictions. Just addictions to even fantasy or romantic ideas that are not truth or reality based. And so it's something I've been working on, and really that square is kind of like, yeah, I feel like it's been my lessons or what I focus on regularly, putting in effort to kind of unravel and untangle what's going on there with the Pluto, Saturn, Mars. And I feel, yeah, so I'm getting to know that part of me and kind of work with that 12th house square.
Can I ask you about the trine with the sun in Pisces in the third house? Do you find you are very creative with your children? Do you do a lot of art? And
absolutely, I'm a singer and a guitar player and a dancer. That was kind of what I did as growing up. That's always what I thought I would end up doing, traveling and being on stage. And so now I just bring that into the home, and singing and dancing is a big part of our lives.
Are your children quite musical and arty?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of them is a little more dancing. One of them is a little more singing, but it's a house where you see that's kind of an everyday singing and dancing.
Did you know when you were, I also left home at a young age, and I lived abroad for 33 years, even though I don't have a moon in the 9th house. Did you know when you were young that you will live abroad?
I didn't live abroad. I always wanted to.
Okay.
It was France, it was Paris, this idea from what I got from movies, very young age, that I wanted to be in Europe. I wanted to be singing on stage in Paris. This was this daydream I had quite strongly I can remember about probably 5 years old when it started. And even though I was very close to my family, my Mexican side of the family, but my mother wasn't there at all. I always had this idea of it would be okay if I completely left California and my roots, and I would just go off and maybe I would find my mother, or, but I really was drawn and pulled to leave California from quite a young age. And then I did that. Yeah.
Fascinating.
So that's one part of what I did think about as a child would be living abroad, was kind of one of my main focuses.
Great. Anything else? All right, amazing. So, Sharon, are you able to go next as the next Cancer moon?
Yes, I was just writing some things down, so I didn't forget.
I'll put up your chart there, and we can have a look as we go.
I've been known to like telling a story when I speak, so if I start to go off on a tangent, please bring me back, because once I get on a roll, you might not be able to shut me up. So yeah, as everyone can see, I might just put the chart on my phone so I can remind myself. Everyone can see that I have a moon, Cancer moon in the 8th, and I've only probably more recently discovered the interpretation of that. And I was just fascinated, because when you're discovering your own chart, I mean, I think I did my chart for the first time on Cafe Astrology, probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And that's where I started to become obsessed with astrology. I've done maybe more than 300 natal charts for people, but in particular men, because I found it a great tool to help them understand who they really are, and why I've probably done so many for men is in 2015, my best friend, husband and father to our 2 daughters, the last man in the world that anyone could ever think could do such a thing, took his own life. And it was the night before he was due to fly back to his construction job. It was a fly-in, fly-out situation. So he worked away 4 weeks he would work away for 4 weeks and come home for a week of R&R. And he'd done that for the majority of his working career. In fact, we both met at a gold mine. So that just shattered our lives, and it hasn't ever been remotely the same ever since. Unfortunately, I was the one that found him, and we'd had an argument the last time I spoke to him. So I took that pretty much to heart, and probably still today feel in some way that if I had never have had that argument, things could have been different. But because he worked in this construction mining industry, long story short, his employer treated me very badly afterwards and told me to go get a lawyer and weren't going to pay out any of his entitlements and what have you. And so for the first time, I did a very public post, and it kind of went viral. And I just had thousands of comments and responses with similar stories of how men were feeling in this particular industry and the type of toxic culture that it promotes. So I saw that as an opportunity that I should grab for some reason. And I became an advocate for suicide prevention and became quite well known in that mining construction industry. And instead of these men reaching out to their doctor or to someone they know, they were actually trying to contact me, a complete stranger, which I found made it so much easier for them to actually open up and talk to me and be really honest. And I called it, taking off the mask, because most men wear a mask when they go out, and they've spent a lifetime building that mask, and they're quite often very different underneath. And the gap in between the reality and what they've made themselves to appear becomes so great that they usually later in life, around 40 or 45, they tend to have a time I've found where they start to wonder who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. And it's kind of like a midlife crisis or a dark night of the soul, but or a Saturn return even, but that doesn't really add up to the 30-year cycle of Saturn. So I'm not sure if that was just something that happened to appear more times than not. But I just found astrology to be a fantastic tool, because most men, gosh, they don't even read, their horoscopes in a magazine. Not that is anywhere near the truth, but, and funnily enough, most men know the exact time that they're born too, whereas females tend to not know that information. I found that quite interesting. So, yeah, when I did their chart, I could then see who they were and how they reacted and behaved through the chart. And I would explain to them this. I'll never forget doing one for a gentleman, and I think he had 6 placements in Cancer. And I just immediately said, oh my gosh, you must cry a lot. And he just burst into tears and said, oh gosh, yeah, I do. And he says, I'm so embarrassed by that, and I feel less of a man because I am so emotional. And when I explained to him why he was like that, he had so much water in his chart, he literally walked out of the man cave, which is where I did most of this kind of work. It was my husband's favourite place to be, was his man cave. So kind of converted that into a place for men to meet up and talk on a bloke to bloke kind of basis. And then they realised that they weren't alone, that there was a lot of other men out there feeling or experiencing the same thing. But men, as you know, don't talk. They were never given permission to be vulnerable. And I just felt that because I was aware of this toxic culture in that construction mining industry, that this was something that no one was speaking about. And if anything, they were being misdiagnosed as being depressed and then medicated with antidepressants that cause suicidal ideation, which is the insane part about it all. And I became very anti-big pharma when I discovered these things and started to put that information out. And then I just started digging down these bunny holes, and, you know, like an onion, I just kept revealing layer and layer of truths that, you know, at 45, I thought I knew most things in life, but I just had no idea how the world really worked and how evil it is and the underlying agenda. And the more corruption I exposed in that industry, the more ostracized I became. And then, I found that none of the mental health industries or services wanted to have anything to do with me, because I was literally telling people the truth, that there was nothing wrong with them at all, you know, that they were just experiencing shitty situational circumstances, and they didn't need medicating. They just needed someone to listen to them, and quite often someone that they didn't know, that was wasn't biased and wasn't there to judge, was the perfect person, and probably someone that they were never likely to meet in real life as well helped, because most of these men told me things that they've never told anybody, and they just felt it very easy to talk to me because of my lived experience as being the wife of a suicide victim. I never looked at myself as being a victim. If anything, I feel the opposite. But I just find that my Cancer moon takes over probably the larger part of the way that I react. I would call myself someone who reacts emotionally immediately before I even have a chance to press pause and zoom out a bit. And I have to constantly remind myself to not respond straight away or react. And the longer I can give myself before I have to do that, the more my reaction changes. And that's been a really valuable lesson for me, because I could never understand why I was so emotional or intense. And having a Scorpio, I think it's a stellium, might have something to do with the intensity factor. And the fact that people come to me and always have with their secrets and tell me things. And that moon in the 8th house, I just wonder whether, you know, that has something to do with things, and the stellium in the 12th house with regards to my husband. I'm still not quite able to see that in my chart. But the more I learn, the more I realise that Pluto must have crossed his sun at some point, because he was a Scorpio, a Capricorn sun. And the more I've been learning about that placement with Pluto going over the sun, it sounds like a very intense time in someone's life. And that kind of makes a little bit of sense, because to me, you know, that's how he's remembered now, is the way that he died. And that's so unfair, because it wasn't him. You know, he was under the effects of not taking his antidepressants for 4 days. And that, I found out, can make a really big difference in someone's mood. And of course, he was flying back to the toxic job that he hated. Otherwise, you know, he would never miss a day's work. So the fact that he preferred to check out in life versus go back proved that there was something really awful going on there. So anyway, as I said, you haven't pulled me back into line yet, but yeah, that's perhaps where I started asking questions. Why? And
I just
I've
wanted to
now,
say I'm so amazed at how you embody your chart. Like it's always amazing how people embody their charts, but you're just pulling
thank you.
everything out of the chart into your life, and I find it fascinating that you're
Oh, thank you.
embodying
I did.
this role in this way.
Yeah, well, to me, it helps me understand why. I'm perhaps, I never considered my life difficult or hindered in any way until, like, I was what you call living the dream. You know, like, my husband and I had worked hard. we had several investment properties, and we had a plan, you know, and we worked hard. We loved each other. Even after being married for 18 years, you know, he was still the love of my life, although I found that we were becoming more and more distant towards those last couple of years. But, you know, he was the best dad in the world, the best mate anyone could ever hope to have, the best boilermaker. You know, he could get away with just about anything. And I just never even dreamt in a million years that I would have a life without him. So it was a really big shock that not only he did that, but it was what happened afterwards that was really quite mind-blowing. Suicide really sucks because people can't deal with it. They can't understand it. And then that reflects on you, who's left behind. So, you know, I'd have to say maybe 95% of the people that were once in our lives have never been able to hang around or stay around afterwards. I felt that they were grieving in such a way that they couldn't even look at me. So I got quite resentful on that because, of course, at his funeral, everybody promised, you know, to be around and be available. Yet, you know, nobody was. Most of the people I haven't seen since his funeral. So it says a lot because people just don't either understand it. And of course, you know, quite often there is nothing to understand it. But I never experienced grief before, apart from my grandmother passing away. Nobody close to me in my life had ever passed away. So, but I have to admit that my entire life I had this deep hidden sense that I would experience something like this. And I don't know whether it was, I couldn't say that I was attracted to the word suicide, but I feel that I resonate, maybe is a better word, with all things taboo. And suicide is one of those subjects. And I'm very attracted to anything of the occult, anything that's hidden. For example, I'm learning all about, you know, debased dog Latin, which is not part of the English language. And it's perhaps the way that these bastards have actually deceived us into these tacit agreements and contracts and things that we have no idea that exist, that have existed ever since we were born. So I'm learning about the birth certificate fraud and all things related to law, the difference between legal and lawful, because I'm planning on taking on my bank and my local government. And to do that, I need to be prepared and know my stuff inside out because, you know, going by who's come before me, most people haven't been successful, or there certainly isn't a precedent on record about it anyway. They hide everything.
I think I'm going to have to cut in there, Sharon, because otherwise we'll go on.
Yeah, sorry.
Off topic.
But
so we're just
as you can see,
but it's definitely showing up again and again in your moon. What you're describing, all of it is there, very intense.
And the current transits are definitely reflecting on what's, you know, happening in my life too. So, yeah, anything related to the moon, I just don't know how it relates to our day-to-day, or how the moon, wherever it's in, relates to what's happening elsewhere in our charts. I would assume it's the way that we're feeling whilst those transits are happening. Is that right?
Yeah, it depends if the moon is also implicated in the transit. It's not necessarily, I mean, basically
Yes,
the moon is so personal to you that you'll always sort of carry that through whatever you do, because your emotional nature doesn't change based on circumstances, or your mental frame of, you know, your frame of mind doesn't change.
Right.
You'll bring that into whatever circumstance you have. So it's kind of a given, but particularly if the moon is triggered, then you're going to have a more maybe visceral emotional reaction.
Yeah. I just cry at the top. I just cry so easily. And that's probably the thing that I really get annoyed the most is, you know, when I don't want to show that emotion or vulnerability, my eyes leak, and I can't hide that. So yeah, apart from that, I'm pretty happy how I've turned out.
Yeah.
As they say, things happen to people who can handle it, so they say, although I don't like that analogy, but it turns out most of those analogies are actually true. And yeah, once again, I just really appreciate being here, and I will now mute myself or get some duct tape and be quiet.
Jump in again when you feel the call. So thanks a
Okay,
million.
thank you.
Your story is just amazing, just fascinating. For me, a fascinating illustration of an 8th house moon, particularly in its dignity in Cancer. Amazing, with all that 12th house energy. So I happen to be the 3rd Cancer moon, so I'm going to go with my chart here. And so you can see that I've got a 1st house / 12th house moon. And so in the whole sign house, this would be considered it is a 1st house moon. But in any of the quadrant houses, this pushes back into the 12th house. And just for info, in terms of how I work with that, when something is around an angle in this way, I will, as a priority, consider that a 1st house, because I prefer now to work with the whole signs. But I always keep in mind that that's also behaving very strongly like a 12th house moon. And so in my analysis of somebody, which you might hear through my experience as well, is going to always contain an element of both. So in the case of this 1st house / 12th house moon, for example, I've always been, of necessity, comfortable showing up in the world. It's not necessarily what I would prefer to do. Like, I would rather just kind of be quiet and shy. But when push come to shove and I had to show up, whether it be to, I changed schools a lot when I was growing up. I had something crazy like, we moved 12 or 13 times before I was 18. So I was changing schools a lot. So you just have to kind of rock up and present yourself. Otherwise, you just don't have any, connection. And so that moon, I assume it's that moon. I feel it as an interior confidence allowed me to just kind of show up and be visible, in a group, or in a, if I had to present something in school or something. This is why it took me years. So there were 2 reasons it took me years to get on YouTube. One was I knew it was a hell of a job and I didn't have the time. And the second one is I just hate looking at myself. I am fundamentally shy. And so that is partly the Cancer moon, and it's partly, I think, that 12th house energy of my Cancer moon, because my ascendant is so late.
That's interesting, because I also can't stand looking at myself or taking photos of myself.
Yeah.
I'd rather be behind the scenes. And I wonder,
Totally.
with the other Cancer moons, is that similar as well?
Camille, do you have that as well, Camille? Not so much. No, she's our performer. She's got the sun in the 5th, so that's kind of a cheat. So that sun in the 5th brightens up that shyness, I think. So my sun is in the 9th. It's also trine, much like Camille had as well.
I will say I feel like an introvert is my more comfortable space.
For sure, yeah.
But I don't mind being out there too.
And it's really important that you say that, because I have exactly the same sense of that. And I also always try to clarify to people that introvert does not mean you're shy, and introvert doesn't mean that you cannot stand in front of a group of people or do things. It just means that you're happy.
You prefer not to.
Yeah, your energy is better when you are calm and interior and reflective and in a quiet atmosphere. Whereas extroverts tend to get their energy, their vibe sort of improves when they're in a group or a crowd, right?
And do you think the reason why you've been able to show up when you've needed to is because your moon sign is the same as your rising sign? Is there any correlation?
It might be because that gives that confidence. That's one of the things that you'll see, whether it's the moon or any other planet, when you have the ruling planet in the first, plus it's
Yes.
also in harmonious aspect to the sun, it is a signature of confidence. So again, that doesn't apply if you're looking at it from the 12th house perspective, but
No.
it's certainly been my experience. And that also is yeah, it's a signature of the same, you were talking about this energy of tearfulness. Like honestly, I can cry at anything. I would cry.
I know.
Kids, we would go and watch films, or we'd be sitting at home watching a DVD or something. We're that old, and
Lassie.
and
Anything to do
I
with
would
an
be
animal.
crying. It would be literally every time, and it didn't even matter what film we were watching.
Even if
There'd be,
somebody
some
wins a
touching
trophy,
moment.
if someone wins a trophy and they're emotional, immediately I just cry. Like
Exactly.
it's
just
okay for a
there.
woman, but not so much for a man.
It's
I don't
harder
think.
for a man, for sure. I think that's culturally really challenging. It's a great shame, because I do feel that is part of an emotional need. The emotions are so on the surface, and that first house energy is even more so, because I cannot hide how I feel. However much I have learned to put on a public face, as you need to. But I am super affected by even atmospheric changes, whether it be the weather or the energy around me or the people
Wow.
around me. I find it really hard to buck up. It costs me a lot of energy to always have to kind of go through things that are a little more challenging. So I've learned, where before, when I was younger, I would throw myself in thinking, what's wrong with me? I should, be showing up and partying like everybody else. And then I realized it's like, actually, this doesn't make me happy at all. I'm so much happier in my quiet life, my quiet space. I have to say also, with the Cancer moon, I'm not sure if it sounds very much the same. I didn't hear so much from you, Sharon, about your mom, but I was very close with my mother. And my mother was very fragile. My mother was also a very sensitive person herself. And like the typical sort of baking cookies, homemaking, she was a registered nurse as well. So all of that is also very much my way of seeing mothering. And I knew from early years that I would have children. It just never crossed my mind. It was just like, yeah, of course, what else? Like, it's just not, it was just so natural for me. And having children from the point of view of parenting and nurturing was just a breeze. I do have, my fifth house is ruled by Mars, and I have the South Node there. And I did lose a child. So my third child died when he was about 2.5 days old. He had a brain hemorrhage. And so that completely flipped the script for me. That was, I had already been on quite a spiritual path. You can see there's a lot going on in my 9th and then in the 12th. But that was something that completely changed me in so many ways. And it was 2 years. So that was when Pluto was going through my 6th house. There was a bunch of issues around the birth of my daughter, who had to be born by C-section because she had the cord around her neck, and my son was born naturally in a birthing pool, magical experience. Then I ended up having a fibroid, and when they were trying to remove it at sort of 7 weeks postpartum, they nearly killed me. So I had this crazy near-death experience when Pluto was opposing. It was Saturn going through there at the same time, opposing my Jupiter, which represents children. So there were a whole bunch of things that happened in a very short period of time. Then when Pluto moved into my 7th, opposing my moon, just as it moved in, I left my husband. And so there were a number of things that happened very much centered on that moon, that sense of who am I, and how do I operate in the world. And I realized that was not that was not the bug in the program, that was the program. Because for so long I tried to adapt to the world, which is a little more harsh and a little more pragmatic, because let's face it, you can probably tell I'm not a very pragmatic person in many ways. I do my best, but it's lots of water. And so I realized that actually I could really stand up and own all of that, that it took me years to do that because I had to be so in my masculine energy to succeed, which is part of that story up in my midheaven ruled by Mars, but also that needing to show up and be there, showing up, making other people feel comfortable. That was happening around my son's death as well. And Sharon, you mentioned that around your husband's suicide, where people were uncomfortable around that story and around their own emotional reaction to that. And so they couldn't be with you. And I had the same thing with my baby, where people would be unable to come around and they just
don't know what to say. And that's
Yeah.
quite often
Yeah.
what they tell you is, I just don't know what to say. And,
which
and
is fine. Like there's no, I'm not
that's the
asking,
perfect thing to say.
Yeah.
It's the only thing to say, is to
Yeah.
be honest and say that you don't know what to say, because
Yeah.
that just clears the air. It's the people that avoid even saying that.
It's at least saying
That's quite
something,
hurtful.
isn't it? But there is
Yeah.
then in that process of people not being comfortable around it, I ended up finding myself, because I actually had what in yoga is described as a samadhi experience, so like a awakening experience around the death of my son, and so people were coming to see me, but at that point I had actually found an immediate peace around the whole thing. It was literally surrender to the situation.
Yeah.
And so I found myself caring for the people who were coming supposedly to bring their condolences. So it got to this point where I was like, something's changed in me in this experience of awakening. And it was almost like it was animating this moon, moving it from an emotionality, which was very much my early years, decades reaction to life, being very emotional, being very like I remember when I started first doing yoga and they said, don't be so emotional. It's not good to be so emotional. I was like, what do you mean it's not good? It must be amazing. It's like, it should be. You should be emotional. But I totally get what they're saying now, because it disturbs your peace of mind so much. And when I had that loss, it flipped me from that emotionality to a sense of, okay, my role. I saw myself as a kind of an archetypal mother. Now it was not only the archetypal mother, but the archetype of the mother who's lost. And there are billions of those. And so I just felt this incredible strength well up in me. And it really turned my moon around so this was like 2000, end of 2005, 2006, beginning of 2006. And so that changed a lot for me.
I find a lot of things change with the death of those that we love. It really, it either changes you, you evolve, or you remain its victim. And I wasn't going to have any of that.
Yeah. All right. So that's it from me. Does anybody have a question or a comment, or can we move on? We'll go to Samah, who's got a Libra moon. So please go ahead, and I'll.
Susan, may I just ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Just realized that you don't have any planets on fire sign. I'd like to know how is that? How that
bit
works?
Of a handicap, that one. Yeah, so there is my midheaven, thank God for that. So I've got my midheaven is a fiery one. I also happen to have Aries. I didn't put it in the chart, but Aries is conjunct my midheaven to within a degree, and that puts a fire under me, I suspect. And then my ruler of the midheaven is in Sagittarius's house, the 9th house, so that puts a lot of action there. But it's true that my initial reaction to life is passive. Like I don't like conflict. I'm not interested in I'll debate anybody any day. I'm fascinated with intellectual
that actually comes through when you verbalize and articulate yourself. I couldn't explain it before, but knowing now that you have your moon there, it further explains how I feel nurtured and cared for just by listening to your voice.
It's interesting. There's a a wonderful astrologer here in Brussels, French language astrologer, who's become a friend, and he's just extraordinary. And because of him, in many ways, I decided to become an astrologer. I told him that 10 years later, but he told me in our very first session together, he said, you are like food for other people. He said, you have to decide. He said, you have to decide how you want to do this. He said, you can allow yourself to be eaten alive and allow yourself to be taken and like, Shiva, do what you want with me. Or you have to decide to retreat. Those are the two options. And I have to say that there are moments when I'm really okay being that. And there are times when I psychologically or physically need to retreat. And so both are true. In my case, I haven't completely surrendered to the whole story yet, but I just, this is some, when he said that, I was like, yeah, that explains a lot.
Or even like boundaries as well. I found that I discovered that I had no boundaries.
No. I had no boundaries.
I've started, I've had to start to build them because I was being taken advantage of. And I participated in that by not having them in the first place.
But this is it. We have to, part of learning our boundaries is to recognize that we played a huge role in allowing people to impinge on our boundaries, right? That's been a very important lesson, which I really got 12 years ago. That was for me huge. That lesson was a massive con, and I lost everything I had basically. And so that taught me to, it was I tend to go through the school of hard knocks ways of learning things, and so
same.
I got it finally. And so my boundaries in the typical crab fashion are to pull everything in and then just close the shutters and don't
I need to retreat and spend time by myself, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. Otherwise I feel like I take on other people's emotions way more than I realize.
Like a sponge. I think this is the word in general. All right, so let's have a look now at Samah's chart. Here we go, and we've got this amazing stellium in Libra at the top.
I don't know if I could tell the difference between which, there's just a lot of Libra activity, but thank you for inviting me for this conversation. It's the timing is it's very interesting for me just to have this conversation with people also from different perspectives. So I'm an artist, and I'm living in Brussels. I also do astrology, and I come from I'm of Palestinian origin. I've lived in Jordan, so I also am very interested in the history of astrology. I really am interested in history in general. And so aside to the astrology readings, the history of astrology is coming into my work as an artist. So I do performances and collages mostly. And I think it was about five or 6 years ago. I've been reading astrology for a long time, but about 5 or 6 years ago, I just decided I either do something with this, or I would, I thought to myself, I'm going to study it until it stops making sense. And I think here's where the Libra sort of intellect will, it's okay, fine, do it until things don't add up, things don't make sense. But I have to say, what I've also learned a lot about through this process is that, which is maybe counterintuitive to my Libra stellium, is to think about the different languages that astrology offers, and how we desperately need to tell our world, as they say, reworlding and retelling the narrative. So there it is. So how do I experience my moon? I have to say it is hard for me to differentiate because there's so much Libra activity. So sun, moon, and I mean the Mercury there. So I don't know what the experience is for people who have different elements and different signs, actually. which is what I realized because my last flatmate, Philippa, who's also an astrologer and a mediumist, is that she also had a moon in Cancer. So I was like, oh my God, the world is really difficult, because I'm just like, all right, give me a pragmatic solution to dealing with things. So I do know that I do like to, I like to be practical about how I'm feeling. So how I'm feeling is a mental process rather than an emotional one. I think this is something I'm also learning to try and tackle in a way. But famous to Librans and, you know, being democratic and wanting to keep things sort of balanced, but also try and get people to like them, is that this is something that I've always, and I continuously do, is to talk things through with people, put a rational idea first before anything else, and really try and please people. Because I also don't like confrontation. I don't like to fight. So I think these are like some of the major traits that have come to me. I would be more curious to hear from everyone, like Libra moon for the home. Well, my home is very pretty. I'm like an aesthetic junkie. Everything has to look like perfectly aligned. So there's a lot of like color coding, and the feng shui has to be, and my plants are very happy, and everyone walks into my home and says, wow, this is such a beautiful house. And indeed, I realized also, because I contemplate a lot of this thing, which is the difficulty with working, I think, with Libra, is that it's often reduced to this idea of harmony, beauty, aesthetic, which are, they're kind of a bit flat, right? They're a bit like, you kind of fall like, oh, they like pretty things. But then I started to think about the resonance of beauty, like how beauty resonates, that it produces in us feelings of being in a good place. So whatever your aesthetic is, of course, because not everyone's aesthetic choices are the same, but that it's about needing to get to that vibration of the thing that works for me, that then then my flow is easier, then I can think, then I can move on to the next task. And so thinking about it more than just like things have to look pretty and I need to have flowers in a vase every day, but rather this, which is, I mean, that's I think the challenge with talking and dealing with Libra, is that there is this superficiality perhaps, but then what does it mean in a deeper way to think about what does beauty mean? How does it resonate? What does it bring? And on the counter, like, what does ugly do? It's just, oh my God, it's so ugly. So
I wonder if that's maybe in the case of your chart, since you've got all of that in the 10th with the Capricorn rising. That's your part of sharing yourself in the world, is to show beauty, show us, remind us beauty, remind us of it. And I have the flip side of, like all Cancer risings, then Libra goes to the 4th house in the whole sign house. So Venus rules the 4th. And so I think this is one of the signatures of Cancer, is that their home is usually cozy and pretty and not particularly mine, but often tidy. And just cozy is really more the word. And that's the Libran beauty, that's the aesthetic, this graciousness comes from that. This comes from the Venus, right? That, and even if Venus is nowhere near the 4th house, it's the energy of Venus represents your 4th house as Cancer, and for you, you're bringing it out, you're bringing it to us. Certainly, having seen one of your shows, I can say that you do that, and this is where you pull in yourself into what you're showing us as well, which is, I find, again, another fantastic representation of a chart.
Yeah, and I had to embrace the fact that that I do strive for making beautiful images, beautiful experiences for people. The taste is because I'm working with food right now, so taste, it has to taste good. And why I'm obsessed with taste, like if things don't taste good, I get very upset. I do. I get really I just get so worked. I was like, come on, guys, just a little bit of spices would have done it, you know? Put in some effort. So, but this thing of also like thinking back again about like beauty is that because I'm very interested when you know, I like, is like, okay, I want deeper meaning for sure. And thankfully there's Pluto sitting in the 10th house, very close to my, to Mercury, because I think that's where I had to trust and follow it, the depth that it was calling me to do, to understand that then I, you know, if I will go into this unknown place that I have no idea except a gut feeling that says deeper, 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 more complexity, but still that I know what it does for people when they see a beautiful image. I see how it resonates. I see what they leave with. As an artist, it's also like to think, what do you want people to leave with? What makes you feel good? And I see that beauty has been one of the most moving experiences for mankind for, that's it, you know? So then I was like, okay, so beauty is not so bad.
I also I want to recall another sense of Libra where Venus for Libra is human justice, right? This notion of justness and fairness, which also runs through your art as well, and you.
Yeah.
Do you think that deeper part is to do with the Scorpio? How Scorpio likes to go deep and find meaning underneath the superficial?
Yes, and I only understood it about 2000 and maybe 16, 17. I finally understood that there was something that I was after that I didn't, you know, that there was more of a feeling that I was like unsatisfied, that I had something very complex that I wanted to put together, and that was the Pluto doing, you know, as if demanding the complexity. And by the same token, if I don't do, like when I have conversations, I either go deep one-on-one, sort of like, let's go for it. Otherwise, I'm just like a superficial bunny talking about like the weather. Most of the time it's the weather. So how's the weather? And my, you know, my friends are like, you're talking to a big curator. You might want to talk a bit about your work. And I just, you know, it's like, the context has to be right for me to jump out of the Libra wanting to please. And I think here we can talk about the moon again. Oh God. Susan, we have to do a session on the Saturn. I'm gonna need some help with this guy. But
can I ask you about your interpersonal relationships with people and your ability maybe to beautify situations in the conversation and make people feel good about themselves?
It's a very interesting question. Yes, indeed. I do try and do that. Yeah. I do try and
maybe also a bit, maybe, I don't know, because of the Pluto, maybe there's a bit of I want to control the conversation. I want to lead you to believe that things are great and beautiful. So you try and shine optimism on other people.
Yeah, making things look better than what they actually are.
Yes. Maybe a little bit not making like a delusional effect,
but to be fair.
What I do catch
to
myself, what I do catch myself in the way I speak and communicate with other people is that always trying to give them all sides of the story.
Because you see both sides of the story all the time.
Yeah, but when I communicate, I've realized, and I've been also told, that I can be extremely sharp. And if I'm angry, then, it really comes out.
Look out.
Look out, indeed. And what I do is that as I speak, I now feel like I know that anger that comes from within, you know, sort of a bit more from the gut up. I can feel it. And then I really actively say, all
Regulate
right,
it.
Samah, you either focus and hone in on this so that I am careful and maybe applying my Libra to say precisely what needs to be said rather than lash out and just want to
be more
so
diplomatic
the
versus
diplomatic
cutting.
comes in, yeah.
This is also, so there's two things that jump out of the chart in that regard, in terms of what Ronit was saying, is that the Venus that rules this moon is in Sagittarius, which is super inspiring and very optimistic, and that's part of that energy there. And then what I had in my chart with the moon close to the angle, you've got in the same way. So if you are using a divisional chart, like if you're using a quadrant chart, you would have not a divisional chart, a quadrant chart, you would have all of this to the 9th house. And Pluto in the 9th is known for that dogmatism, or that real intensity, which can be super helpful. With Mercury, it's really a serious message. But that's, now we see that in the 10th house, in the whole sign house. But that's one of those things that I keep in mind. So if I look at the chart, it's like, okay, this is a 10th house, but also a 9th house. Stellium, partly because of that midheaven being so late in the sign.
But it was very interesting. So one of the themes that I like as a way of thinking about what my moon doesn't give me easy access to is my emotions, and I think that has been and if you look at the transits now, I have a moon trine Pluto, and and then we've got the square of the node. So I was like, yesterday I actually fell. I slipped in the road and I fractured my wrist. And interestingly enough, it's just like, it was kind of ouch, but what it actually did was just open the floodgates of emotion. I was like, okay.
Oh, really? Well, the moon was in Cancer, wasn't it, yesterday?
Yeah.
So that may have had something to do with the emotions as well.
We had the moon move into Leo last night. So
okay.
From Wednesday through Friday for us in Europe, from Wednesday through Friday. Wednesday through early Saturday, the moon was in Cancer. Then it moved to Leo.
So thankfully, every now and then I get knocked into the emotional world to access that, because it's not very accessible for me. I really, really have to. It's really windows that open up, and I'm like, I think I'm feeling things. So I think I'm feeling things.
You should take a note of where the moon is on those moments, just to see if there's any correlation to a position. Maybe, I don't know.
No, it's a good tip. Thanks.
Anything else?
I see your Scorpio in Mars in Scorpio. I would imagine you're a bit exciting in the bedroom.
Well, you'd have to ask my partners about that. You'd have
to body masks, no secrets here.
Indeed, the
that Mars
sexual
is
world
also
is very
ruling the 4th, so that's that intensity again. That Mars is your 4th house ruler, so there you've got that strong intensity.
But I mean, I was also I was born and raised in quite a like a traditional setup, like in Kuwait and Jordan, and so it's not easy to have that kind of
I would imagine
Mars. And my mom was just basically always freaked out. She's like, this girl will dishonor the whole family. And my dad's like, let her express herself. And then my mom's like, too much, mama. Go put something else on. It's too short. It's too repeating. I'll be like, oh God. So it was
that's
there.
Funny.
All right. Well, I just want to keep pace going, so that because we still have, I think, 3 people who are going to share about the moon. So any last things to wrap up about the Libra moon?
Just one thing, Susan. Samah, do you think that maybe the Libra moon, that you said that it's hard for you to deal with emotions? When I think about Libra, I think about a bit of people pleasing, and you might concern what your emotions might bring to people, especially with, I don't know, Cancer descendant. I don't know, that's something that came to my mind. I don't know if it makes any sense.
It's been it's still, of course, I mean, I guess for all of us, it's an ongoing journey of, but indeed, I've always put other people first. I've always wanted to keep the balance first. I've always tried to rationalize through emotional situations, and therefore having a much, to learn much later, what does it mean to try and access, what does it mean to be in touch with my emotions, and when do they appear? And I'm more of a people pleaser, and I'm learning to balance that out so that it's not the first thing that I do is try and get people to like me, but I've been wanting people, even in the family setup, even with my mother, I want her to I want her to like me. I want her to think, that I'm, so I mean, for the most part, it's, of course, there's nothing, but as you grow older, you're a bit like, well, try not to overdo it. So now the idea is like, just don't overdo it. Like, okay, you'll always want people to like you, because it rocks my boat funny when people get upset with me. I just get also very weirded out. So I have to find, again, the balance between myself and what I need, and then also how not to compromise myself for other people.
Excellent. Okay, we'll move on now to a very spicy moon. Petra has a Scorpio moon. So Petra, are you ready to share about your moon?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have the Scorpio moon, and I met you and in Brussels, when we lived in Brussels, and now I live in Cologne. And first starting maybe with my home, my mother is Scorpio, and so there was it's a kind of difficult relationship, I think. She always gets, there was some entanglement, presses to the wounds, it's always, I met intense experience, I think in my early childhood already. And what I can say, that I always was asking questions. I want to look behind the things, and I was always interested what is behind who I am, why I'm here, what can I learn, which satisfies me, because what I experienced was always, I ask questions. I'm asking questions all the time. And people were telling me secrets. I love to do things sometimes secretly, because I know something. There's much going on inside myself. And what I'm now doing, I think, with my Libra sun, is showing the inner beauty. I think this is the thing I want to bring into the world when I'm doing maybe astrology coachings, or like potential, what people showing the beauty, and which is inside. Everything, I think, which is really important for me is what's going on the inner life. And what's the meaning behind it? And if I have some like in relationships, if they are superficial, after a while I can't do it anymore. It's boring. It's not that I want to judge, but it's not the thing. Something is missing. I'm always looking for deep meaning, I think, to sum it up. And the thing with my mother was not easy, but still it's in my family now. I want to bring sometimes I always want to bring deep meaning into situations, but people don't want that meaning. Sometimes I have to hold myself back and not pointing out, saying things which I'm interested in, which I'm enthusiastic about. And that's it, to put it in a nutshell. That's how I experience my moon. Is very I cannot live my moon, to say it. So
That's very interesting that you say that, because I've never thought of you in those terms. I'm not I don't know you super well, but I've known you for a very long time, and I've never seen you in terms of not. I've never felt you that way, but of course you feel yourself. But maybe part of the issue is that Neptune that doesn't let you see so clearly what you're, or feel so clearly. There's a confusion around that. I also, just before you answer that, and or maybe it's not at all remotely that, but I just want to point out that Petra was one of my early clients when I first decided I'm going to do this. I don't know if that's like maybe 9 or 10 years ago. I don't even remember. And her chart, and I also have many clients from Northern Europe, whether they came from Kaliningrad or from Finland or from whatever, their charts were blowing me away because I was using Placidus. So I just want you to notice, this is Petra's midheaven, and it's in the 12th house because she's born in the very northern part of Germany. Now, this really throws a chart into a completely different story when you use those quadrant houses, because that squishes everything between the 10th and the 12th into less than 2 signs. And then everything else is just like this explosion, this riot of stuff happening, also squeezed into a very small chunk of 3 signs. And I worked so hard to try and figure that out. What the hell? And it was only when I finally started switching over, which gradually started to happen in 2014 as an experiment, and then 2015 as I started to actually use the whole signs. Then I was like, oh yeah, that's what this is all about. And now when you describe yourself and your moon, it makes so much sense that it's a 12th house moon, but it made so little sense that it was a 10th house moon.
Yeah.
It was like, no, that's just not who this person is. And your chart and many like this were the things that I kept doing both and comparing and saying it's not because I'm a shitty astrologer, it's because the chart is not giving me the information I can extract from it. So I'll carry on being an astrologer and now change the chart that I'm using. And that's what, so you can see that Petra's chart was a massive motivation for me to change from Placidus to whole signs. But tell me about this thing. Do you think that might have some influence here, this Neptune, Petra?
Yes, because these sensing people or sensing energies, sometimes I always have to feel or sense something. It's before my Libra witty brain or whatever comes in, or the logical, that sometimes I have the difficult, because the sensing comes before, and then my head starts, and then I get insecure. But to be honest, if I listen to the first thing, it's always the best. If the head is starting, then it's getting more complicated, and I try to figure it out. But at the end, I know this was true, the first thing.
Yeah, so I would say your intuition is incredible. Like already just a Scorpio moon, very, very, frequently people are very intuitive, almost psychic. Now we've got Neptune right there, and it's in the 12th house. So this is something I would, and I think I have said this, just trust it. It's you will always get the right answer here, and you'll get the polite answer here.
Yes, yes. What I sometimes say, that I try to express deep things which are not always comfortable, in a nice way. This when I say what I mean, to tell inner beauty in a nice way that people can handle it, and so
intensity, but make it look pretty.
Yeah, like this. So I can, in a nice way, I can tell you big stuff. So, or I try to. Yeah. sometimes I can be very harsh, too harsh for people, but yeah, I try to make it look a little bit nicer.
Yeah,
These
'cause
things.
your Mars is squaring the moon, and that's ruling this moon, right? So it's a Mars that loves details. It's a Mars that loves precision, and it's intense. And so it's almost like surgical precision. Like you go in there with the knowledge or with the thing that you want to share, and it's intense. And it's true that for Scorpio, especially people with a lot of personal energy in Scorpio, one of the life challenges is to be people around that are often so threatened, so freaked out by that intensity that they can't handle it. And it's not personal. It's not you. It's the Scorpio energy that the individual in front of you can't take. For whatever reason, they can't sit with it comfortably. So I wouldn't say turn it down. I wouldn't turn the volume down on the intensity. I would just carry on, and the people who need to hear it will hear you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Does anybody else have a question about the 12th house Scorpio moon?
I just think anything in the 12th house of Scorpio gives it a different filter, and usually a more intense filter, and something that's more hidden, and the moon being our inner selves, that explains why she perhaps feels that she is more compelled to feel that intensity as well, because Scorpio placements are usually intense, but being in the 12th house, I think it would be more so. And then adding the fact that it's the moon, you don't get much more intense than that, I wouldn't think, being in the 12th house.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Petra. All right, we're going to go from the dark to the pragmatic now. We've got Marcia and her Capricorn moon.
So, hi everyone, I'm Marcia, I'm Brazilian, and I'm 36 years old, I have 2 kids, and let's go to my moon now. Susan, I usually use the equal house. I don't know if
Equal
you can.
house. Okay, I can change that, yeah.
All right, because I always Susan has been done my reading since 2017, and I do it every year without failing because it's so accurate. I like the whole sign house that Susan uses, but I'm studying and I still using the equal house. For me, it's easier somehow and makes some sense. So I don't know if later on I'll change it. But for the equal house, I have my moon in Capricorn in the 9th. And I will start saying how I felt, how I experienced my mother. And she was a really practical person. So I felt she was a bit dry. So I missed a little bit of affection coming from her. That's something that I struggled for a while, but I think I don't know, I got more mature and I learned how to deal with it. And I think that somehow that helped me a lot because I moved a lot. So I lived in the US, I lived in Belgium, I lived in the UK, now I'm here in Portugal. And I think I brought this practicality to all of these moves that I went through in the last years. So, and I think that's helped me being a mother as well, in a practical way, without losing, I think, the affection, because I think I missed that so much when I was a child. So that's something that I didn't want to give to my children. So I learned that lesson. I want to do it differently. But I think with this moving around and having to have a little bit of roots, whenever we are, so I think that helped me. It was Susan just said that it was a breeze for her with some parts of parenthood. I wouldn't say that was a breeze for me, these moves with kids, small kids, but it wasn't that hard as I thought it could be. It was all right. But something that for me wasn't that comfortable was to not be working for a while during this, when I was moving because of my husband's job. That was a struggle, real struggle for me. And I think that's something about my moon as well, because I think I needed to be more independent myself, and I felt too dependent and I wasn't comfortable with that at all. So yeah, I think that's a bit about my moon.
Fantastic. So if I come back to the 10th house, 9th house question, if I go back to whole sign houses, then that's the same kind of thing that we saw earlier, isn't it? Where we have the midheaven that is in the whole sign going to be your 10th house. So it puts your moon in the 10th, but it also is a 9th house moon from quadrant. And in this case, also from the equal house or the English style. So it's really, it's telling two tales. So that moon is also where you want to show up in your work, in your profession, right? Capricorn, feeling that duty and responsibility, feeling the capacity as well, and that ambition to do that. And especially because the ruler of your ascendant is there on your midheaven, Mars is there, so making that drive even stronger. So I think it's really, for me anyway, it's been very helpful to, although I always just for practical reasons, I use that whole sign system. I always keep that in the back of my mind. It's like, this is going now in a different system. It's going to another house. And that often for me helps me understand how a person is experiencing something, where it might be experienced in the world, in the, like the day-to-day, we can see it in the whole sign house really clearly. Whereas what is more felt or what is more experienced often comes from the other charts. So both are really helpful. I often get questions about why people use one or another. That would be my answer. Anyway, it's not the only answer, but it's been my experience. Does anybody else have a question there about the Capricorn moon?
Yeah, I would actually like to ask Marcia about your relationship to, like, what does the home mean for you? As just, yeah, like whatever the symbology of a home is to you, or yeah, how you emotionally relate to it, but as a person and then as a mother.
Okay, that's so interesting, Samah. I think the last time we moved, my daughter was older. She was 7. No, she was 7. We moved. No, she was 6.5. And she said to me, "How it's gonna be from now on, this next move?" And I said, "We are gonna take everything that we have inside this house. It's gonna be the same house, and it's gonna be the same relationships. So a few things are gonna change. So we have new friends and everything." We speak Portuguese at home, so she goes to an international school, so she speaks English that she was used to speak at school, and Portuguese at home and Portuguese when we go out. But I think I learned how to experience house more within, with my relationships, and without thinking about a place, a physical place. And I don't know right now if I can relate with the culture that I came from a lot. I feel a bit lost when I go back to Brazil. I have my parents' house, I have my sisters, and this what is Brazil means to me, the people, my family. But I don't know, I think I'm not so stuck to a place and something like that. I learned how to I don't know, live everywhere now, I think.
Yeah, I'm just curious because Capricorns tend to have a relationship also with the structure, not so much just the meaning, but more this. My mother has a lot of Capricorn. I can't remember her entire chart, but she's like, I think for me, the symbology of like, she helps people make their home structurally a bit better. She works with Palestinian refugee camps. So the whole idea is like, let's just make the roof you know, like not leaky, or let's build a kitchen. And so that's why I was asking you about like the meaning of home, but maybe I should have said in a like as a structure.
Okay.
Or a routine.
I think I feel it more in a practical, the Capricornian practical way.
Mm.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else? All right, super. So we're going to now go to Aquarius, another moon ruled by Saturn. So let's have a look then. Travis, are you with us? And you can share a little bit about your moon. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to change the houses back to Porphyry for you, because, or was it Porphyry or Placidus?
Placidus. So my name's Travis, and I'm in Belfast, Maine. I first became obsessed with astrology back in November of 2020, just before the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn going into Aquarius, conjunct my moon. And since then, I've been studying it quite a bit. The first thing I noticed when I looked at started studying my natal chart was that I had the moon in Aquarius, and I have Uranus in my first house. And it made me feel like it explained a little bit that I was a weird person, and that it was okay to be weird because it's in my heart.
You're an alien.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. But in Placidus, moon's in my fourth house. So I'll talk about my mom a bit. My relationship with my mom is pretty complex. And growing up, one thing is I had a lot of freedom to do what I wanted, which is very Aquarius. My mom wasn't overbearing in that way, and I had a lot of a free reign to do as I pleased. But on the other hand, our relationship was marked by a lot of sudden events, a lot of them traumatic, that we went through. And I think that's like the Uranus part of Aquarius, the relationship there with Uranus and Aquarius. And these events were difficult because although we have a strong bond, my mother is kind of emotionally detached. And so a lot of the strong feelings that I felt going through these experiences were kind of pushed down and bottled up inside of me a lot of the time. And
was that from when you were a child, when you were very young?
Yeah, as a child, I kind of just like bottled everything up. And I also have Black Moon Lilith nearby, and that doesn't help. But also my moon is trining my ascendant, and I have Pluto on my ascendant, which is intense. So it wasn't until about 2013, 2014 that I began to kind of deal with all those things that I pushed down. I started to go, this coincided with my mom moving in next door to me, but also Uranus was opposite my ascendant at the time. And I was having kind of a little bit of a nervous breakdown. And I went to counseling, and I started taking medications and things like that, but it didn't really do anything to help the anxiety.
How old were you then?
This was in 2014. So what's the math? I was probably like 42 at the time. And so I've always been an artist type person and into drawing. So around that time, I started drawing my memories of my childhood, and it became like therapy for me. And it started to make me feel a lot better, and I was processing those emotions that I had been struggling with, because I was doing them in the form of comics.
You're an artist, aren't you? You're a professional.
Yeah, I'm an artist, and I've drawn comics since I was a kid, but never about myself or about my childhood. But once I started doing that, it became my therapy and really helped me process my childhood, and was very helpful. my moon is also trining my Neptune, which rules like communication with imagery. So I did that, and I started from the first memories I could remember, and I drew my memories chronologically until the age of 16. And this took about 2 years. Every night I would draw a page based on my childhood. And eventually I had 464 pages that covered that span of time. And in 2019, I published it as a book called King of King Court. And in my Placidus chart, you'd see that my sun is opposite my moon, and my sun's in Leo in the 10th. Okay, so I've got that stellium in the 10th house. And so all my my childhood and my trauma is pretty much out there for anyone to see that reads my books.
So did you start doing that as a catharsis, or did you start doing that and then realized it was a catharsis?
Yeah, as soon as I started it, it was a catharsis.
Yeah.
And because counseling and medication just seemed to aggravate my thoughts. And when I started drawing my memories, it was kind of like exposure therapy, because I was kind of spending a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to draw. So when you're drawing a scene that maybe took 10 minutes, it takes 7 hours to draw. And so you're spending a lot of time with that short period of time. But there's a lot of
art therapy as well.
Yeah, that's
art therapy.
That. So it was just for myself to feel better. But then when it was all done and I decided to have it published, then it became something to share with people.
Fantastic. And that's the ruler of your moon, putting it out in the 10th house.
Right.
That's being serious about it. You're serious about your art, as it were, serious about the message.
Exactly.
And what people see.
Right. So I think that's there's a lot more to the moon. Like, I'm always like thinking about my childhood and kind of living in the past too much sometimes, but overall it's been interesting. I kind of overthink things a lot of times with the Aquarius, and I try to go more towards my sun, but it's difficult sometimes.
Yeah, this is always when people are born around a full moon, that's always a challenge, that's what this is. It's approaching a full moon, and that integration of what you feel like and how you are is part of life's lesson here. That full moon, trying to understand why it feels so different on the inside compared to how you want to show up in the world.
There's a lot of times I don't want to show up in the world, but then I feel like my sun and the planets in the 10th are kind of pulling me out there.
Yeah.
Polarity. Do you think the Aquarius being in the 4th house kind of is detaching in a way, or more apathetic about the nurturing side or the vulnerability of the home and family?
Well, I think
for me,
have the stellium in Cancer. It kind of overrides the Aquarius of lack of emotion.
Yeah.
I'm a little
but
too
the moon is in the Aquarius, so it's kind of a polarity in itself.
It's good in ways where I can help other people with their emotional problems from a detached way sometimes, and offer help in that way.
That's something that I can't do, is detach myself. I latch onto people and leave scratch marks.
But you've also got that supportive trine to Pluto, like that's that kind of fearless plumbing of the depths, and that allows you, a bit like what Petra was describing, allows you to go to places that might be otherwise intimidating. So it takes that towards other people from the place that you've already been, that challenge, that depth.
Right. And I guess that came in handy when working on the book and trying to look at things that I was afraid to, or that may seem too dark.
I just wanted to add about Aquarius, because the thing with the Aquarius is that they are actually it's a very sensitive sign, very aware of how it appears to people. So there is this thing of it. There is this, of course, like the alien detachedness, and also like quite cerebral. But at the same time, and that's, I think, the thing that always throws a lot of people, and even the Aquarians, maybe even themselves, is that there is a very acute awareness of the presence of in other people's eyes. So there is this.
Do you think it's more of a collective thing more than an individual thing with Aquarius?
No, I mean, Aquarians are they take things very personal quickly. It's really like. So
yeah, there's a lot of ego in Aquarius too. Yeah, we can
and not the
I
ego of
Aquarius.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, but for me, it's not it's not the ego of the the fire. So it's like Aries and Leo.
No.
That's not maybe as
It's a
aware.
different kind of ego.
Yeah, this one's
They're
very
more
aware.
aloof in a way. They come across as aloof.
Well, yeah,
My
they
son
come across
has
as arrogant
ascendant in Aquarius,
or
and
indifferent.
he comes across aloof, but he's the most emotional person.
Yeah,
and very like attentive if he wants to be.
you have to get to know them to know that
but
that's
what I see,
who they truly are.
in this instance is Uranus in the first. So I think that the struggle of the inner world, wanting to showing yourself as who you are, presenting yourself who you are in a Uranian way, but yet it's like
lightning bolts.
Can I be me? Can I be me? And how can I be? And how can I show people that I'm different and I'm okay? And feel different. Can I feel different?
Yeah, I feel very different, and I feel uncomfortable in a lot of ways because I feel so abnormal in that. So I don't show a lot of people who I am, and I really don't feel like I know who I am still. And I'm always trying to figure that out. And with the Pluto there, as I'm and always going back into my past and living it, trying to figure out and put the pieces together of who I am.
Well, Cancers are very sentimental, and they like to look back, and they can't let
do Libra,
go easily.
I don't know why I also feel Libra like living in the past. Is this something that you're familiar with? Like people that have got a lot of Libra, they like to live in what happened in my history.
Yeah, this history is very, very strong. I have no, I can't explain it. And also my friend was like, "Oh, really? You guys are into history?" I was like, "Yeah."
But they reminisce a lot about the past, and they tend to remember. They have vivid memories of particular things, like you say, like what you wore, because their beauty and the Venus in it, and so maybe it's also like you want to remember because of the Libra. You want to remember yourself, how you were as a child, so you're going backwards, and instead of moving forward and maybe shine your sun in Leo and allow it to shine like the way you should, you tend to rather go backwards. And maybe with age, I think that maybe when you get a bit older and mature, that you can almost expose yourself to the world and say, you know what, that's me. I'm Uranian, I'm different, I'm an individual, I'm shining my bright sun, my Leo sun to the world.
Yeah, I did that with my comics, but I'm not good at doing it through conversation or in person, one-on-one, which I think is the Aquarian thing, where I'm not great with one-on-one relationships, but more like communicating to a group.
That's that Chiron too, isn't it? In the 7th, that feeling of being a bit vulnerable in relationship, and then that squaring, there's this T-square here. With
and what about the Venus in Cancer as well? Like that seems the opposite of Aquarius in the 4th to me.
Yeah, but I think in terms of communication, that Venus she's going to be shy, right? So especially because it's just 2 degrees off
Saturn.
Saturn, so it's a shy and
And
restricted
Saturn's always
Venus.
making me like, because Venus is art and I'm a Libra rising, and Saturn is the taskmaster, and I'm always making myself draw all the time and get my work done.
Yeah, which is the great use of that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
It's
that's
interesting that you
how
chose
it's
to
gonna
do it in a
come back.
comic form as well, a comic form versus like more of a visual picture form versus, you know, in words. You've articulated things in a way that perhaps more men resonate with than women as well.
Well, if you read my book, it's mostly pictures. I don't have there's dialogue in it, but it's not narrated, and it's mostly through images and symbols that I kind of communicate how I'm feeling through the book. And Neptune.
Yeah, and that reflects in itself with Aquarius with regards to the moon as well, to not necessarily be emotional or verbal about it. You've done it in a different modality.
Right.
In the picture form. I find that really interesting myself.
What else can we say there? Anybody have a comment or question? I must say I really appreciate your vulnerability with us. It's really been,
Yes, he's the token male. So
yeah.
congratulations for being
First
brave
of all,
enough.
thanks for showing up in the first place and being so incredibly open because it's been
a rare thing.
journey. Yeah, that's been quite a journey.
Yeah, thank you for.
See, I find women are given permission to be vulnerable, whereas men were never given permission to be. But from the moment that they were deemed big enough, they were told to harden up and you're a big boy now. And it's so sad, really, because it's just so unfair. I find that very unfair from a woman's perspective.
Take so much longer, doesn't it? And then the journey to healing becomes just so much more difficult. Right. Well, everybody, we're at the 2-hour mark here.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah, thanks a million for all of you for being here and sharing your stories. I really look forward to some future topic. And if you can't join us for the next one, then join when you can. I think it would be fun if we could do this every month and just connect on some topic, whatever, something.
Thank you for the invitation.
Because we're learning, I think, not only for ourselves, but also for our clients as well, for the people we work with. I know not all of you are working with clients, but one day maybe you will. I would suggest also for those who are not yet doing that to just jump in and do that and not kind of waste all this time sort of saying I'm not ready yet, I don't know enough yet, because the doing is the most phenomenal way to learn.
That's right. I just put in a disclaimer. I give people, you know, the disclaimer of that I'm not a professional, that I'm doing it purely from a self-taught basis. And it's more of an intuitive knowing than it is a technical knowing.
Yeah, which is also perfectly valid. You know, there's it's very difficult to quantify how much is technique and how much is actually what I feel is like there's an instinctive aspect that comes through something just clicking in the chart, and it's like, oh, that seems to fit, and it's impossible to say how much is 50-50.
I just find it's the most fascinating thing I've come across and learned, and it's also probably the most underrated. You know, like if we only knew to do this with our potential partners and in different parts, you know, in stages of our lives, you know, we would be less victims and more aware of things. I think awareness is a big word. And just out of interest, I'll just tell people this. I only found this out myself. I looked up the Sabian symbol for my Sagittarius rising, and it's an owl. Now, like, you just can't make that up, because an owl flew into my life 6 years ago and keeps coming back. And I believe it resonates with my husband, and I've been obsessed with owls ever since. I mean, he even flew into the house. Like, who gets an owl in their house, you know?
They do say traditionally, across a lot of different traditions, birds often represent the deceased.
Well, my husband always had birds in his life. We've got 2 massive aviaries out the back. So, and not only that, it's found in Tasmania where he was born, called the southern spotted owl. So the relevance and the significance of it all was just incredible.
Sometimes the omens are clear, and then the mind wants to make that make more sense. And
well, if I had found that out any other time in my life prior to his death, I wouldn't have had as much meaning. But to me, I just thought, and I think my sun sign represents an X-ray, which is all about me, you know, being penetrating and wanting to go through deeper and see what's underneath or what's really there. So I just was fascinated with the significance of the Sabian symbols. I've just been diving into that recently.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. So
thank you to
so
everyone
much
for sharing.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone.
A lovely group. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was really a pleasure to be
respect for each other, which is wonderful. So thank you, and I'll see you. I'll propose another date, and if you can join, that would be great. And if not, we'll just keep trying another time. Okay. And if you've got
wonderful.
My dog's now ready for her walk. She hears when I'm wrapping up, and then she's like, "Oh, we can go." If you have either an area of curiosity or a thing that you'd like to focus in on, and that especially you that would have a broad appeal, then do let me know. We'll send out some topics, and we can set up a kind of a mini agenda for the months ahead, and just keep checking in on a particular theme. Okay.
And I think it'll be exciting because from March next month, when Pluto and Saturn will be changing signs. That'll be really exciting.
Yeah.
Second. And happy full moon to everybody too.
Yeah. Well, let's do that. Then I used to do full moon meditations like for 14 years or something. I just met every month, but it was live, and then I moved it online, and it just kind of fizzled out. So this is kind of replacing that. Petra, you've been to a few actually, Petra. Would be really lovely. We can kind of build it around a full moon, and if it falls on a weird date, we'll just push it a day ahead or a day after. Okay, so great to see all of you here. Travis, thanks a million for representing the male of the species, and we'll see if we can fish up some more men as well, because I think it would be really wonderful to have more of that input. All right.
Sure.
So much love to all of you. Happy full moon. It's almost exactly the full moon, so you can literally switch off. It's in 15 minutes, actually, the full moon.
Perfect.
So switch off and do your whatever you do. So
I better get all my clothes off and run around naked.
Okay, I won't. It's like 8 degrees outside, so I won't be doing that. All right, everybody.
It's hot here.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.